Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming, and welcome to The Dangers of AI, Deepfake, and Manipulated Media. My name is Brandy Vega, and I'm the founder of DanCan, Vega Media Studios, and Promise to Live. I've been dealing in this world for about almost 30 years now. It started back in 1995 when I joined the Army as a broadcast journalist and public affairs specialist, where I spent time at the War College working with global leaders. And I remember a time when we were just talking about the dangers of manipulated media, what that looks like, what we can expect. And it was a big concern back then. In fact, that was part of my job as a broadcaster training at the War College. A big part of what we did was to manipulate the media to catch people saying and doing things that they didn't actually do or say, or to edit it in a fashion that made it look like they had said something they didn't, out of context. I know, how many of you have seen that happen? That's part of the reason I got out of television and started my company. So today we want to really just go over this and kind of how it affects you, how it affects business, and why we should care. That's a little bit of my background. In the military, served in the Army, then I worked for Fox News. I worked in TV and media as a reporter, anchor, producer for several years. And I started my own company going on 10 years ago now. And this has been a hot topic with a lot of clients. And we've recently came up with our new company, DanCan. It's digital authentication, certified non-negotiable. But before we dive in, I just want to take time to introduce our amazing guests. We have Adam Marre, we have Brandon Amacher, and we have Nate Mills. And I'd love for each of you to just take a minute or two and explain your background.
Okay, great, thank you, and thanks for having me here today. Yeah, my name is Adam Marre. I am the Chief Information Security Officer at Arctic Wolf, which is a security operations company offering security operations solutions to businesses all over the world. Before that, I was head of security operations at Qualtrics. Probably a lot of people seeing this know what Qualtrics is, but if you've taken an online survey, you've interacted with Qualtrics. So that was a great and very difficult thing. But before that, I was an FBI agent for 12 years, primarily investigating cyber crimes. So that's where I really cut my teeth in security. Before that, I did spend time in the Army as well as a counterintelligence agent, and I was a... Hua. That's right, Hua. And I was also a video game developer before that, right out of college, so at a studio here in Salt Lake City. So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
Very cool. Going after Adam, I'm going to sound comparatively lame, but
Not true.
My name is Brandon Amacher. I'm the director of the Emerging Tech Policy Lab at Utah Valley University. I also teach in the Center for National Security Studies. Prior to that, I worked for a cybersecurity consulting firm and incident response firm called Mandiant. I did some threat intel stuff and strategic development. Prior to that, I was in defense contracting, working with advanced technology and cybersecurity solutions for Department of Defense, the intelligence community, Department of Homeland Security, and a few others, and started off my career as a cyber intel analyst. So that's my background.
Great, Nate.
Hey, thank you for having me here. My background's going to sound significantly different than these gentlemen here. I've spent most of my career on the business side. In the last 24 years, most of my time has been in the technology sector, taking strategy and translating it into tactics and execution. I spent a couple years in cybersecurity, but I'm not cool technology guys like these guys. I was a sales guy, but I loved reading their reports. And I've since founded a company called Alethea, and we help fight wire transfer theft. And there's been some experiences that we've had along these lines, which is why Brandy's invited me today. So thank you, Brandy.
Okay, thank you guys for being here. So I think the question on everybody's mind is kind of, how widespread is this, and how serious is it really? I mean, I know, like, I've seen a lot of things happen with deepfake videos, money lost, lives lost. Do we have the video? Okay. I'd like to play this short video so that you can understand what we're talking about when we talk about this subject.
Seeing is not believing, especially in the age of artificial intelligence.
Deep fakes of Taylor Swift, explicit in nature. One image shared 47 million times before being taken down.
Elections, misinformation, fake news, identity theft. Just last month, a finance worker in Hong Kong got scammed into paying a whopping $25 million.
Because artificial intelligence is fueling a boom in cybercrime. The cost is expected to hit $8 trillion this year.
Fraud and scams are going to run rampant. People are going to exploit other people.
Mr. Beast becomes the latest celebrity to have a deepfake video scam target their followers.
A simple AI-generated fake image sparked about a $100 billion stock market move.
Deep fake photos like these swirled around social media.
Pro-Russia social media accounts are using false claims about so-called crisis actors to try to get people to doubt the credibility of important, accurate media reporting.
This one purports to show Ukraine's heroic President Zelensky supposedly telling his soldiers to surrender.
A missing Chinese exchange student found safe after being manipulated by cyber kidnappers.
Now scammers have used artificial intelligence on us, manipulating our coverage to try to scam more people.
The media has already shown us the harm that powerful technologies can do without the right safeguards in place.
We have to learn how to find confirmed sources to make sure the authenticity of those videos that it's real.
Right now, what we're seeing on the internet, unfortunately, is the Wild West of the internet. There aren't a whole lot of guardrails up for protecting the American people.
Dan can authenticate, Dan can verify. When others can't, Dan can.
So the video gives you a background of what we're talking about today and why it matters to you. And I just want to have each of you kind of address this. Why should we care?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And one, like a lot of cybercrime, people tend not to think about until it affects them directly. So even though you have like $3 billion of business email compromise attacking companies, you have even more in ransomware every year, to a cybercrime industry that's worth almost $1 trillion, until it really affects someone directly, personally, a lot of times they don't think it really involves them. It's similar to a lot of other technologies. We've allowed, for example, social media companies to externalize and not have to pay for all of the damage they're causing in the world, and most people don't care until it affects them directly. It's affecting their child. So this is really one of those things where it is affecting lots of people, millions of people today, but it just hasn't quite penetrated everyone's perception. We are really worried about it in the security industry right now because we are seeing this more and more. And even though it didn't happen immediately that everyone started using these tools and deepfakes to help supercharge their attacks, and the reason they didn't was because they're already so effective that they didn't necessarily need to add this, but they are starting to add it. You're seeing it more and more across the spectrum of cybersecurity, whether that's influence operations trying to affect elections or other political movements in countries, or all the way down to just trying to scam people with a little bit more effectiveness. What really changed here was when OpenAI released ChatGPT on the world. It was one of those things like the fall of Rome where it happened gradually then all at once. That's what happened. AI's been around for a long time. Deepfakes have been around for a long time. But once it was put ubiquitously into the hands of just about everybody who has an internet connection, that changed the game. And not only are people using it, but people realized they could use it. And what that results in is what we're dealing with now and grappling with this in all the different ways we're grappling with it. So what's going to happen is it's going to get worse and worse. We've got to prepare for it. And I think that's what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Brandon, how serious there's been events that you've been involved in. How serious is the problem?
I mean, it's incredibly serious. And, I want to agree with everything that Adam said, and I think when you look at it on a case-by-case basis, you can see how powerful this technology is. But the thing that I think is even more daunting to me is when you zoom out and you kind of look at it from a strategic level or look at it from a policy level, because I think, 2016, 2012 to maybe 2020, we saw a huge erosion in what we would view as the public common truth, right? Kind of the fake news boom, in that people all of a sudden, we don't have the same trust in secondary news sources that we used to, right? It used to be you read a news article, you could have a certain, or most people had a certain level of confidence in what they were seeing. So now you've seen a lot of people kind of shift to, well, I want to look at the primary sources. I want to go directly to what this person is saying. I'm very concerned that we could see that same type of erosion in public confidence or in that shared common truth with primary sources now, because you could have parties saying, oh, that's not real, that's AI, or you could have, and pointing towards real content to discredit it, or you could have legitimately AI generated content spreading misinformation. And that could create this environment where, what would remain even of a common truth to base our civil discourse off of?
Right. Nate?
Well, I've been looking very closely at what's happening in finance and banking, and while I know the topic of our session here is primarily AI, that's simply just AI-generated deepfakes is just simply a new tool that the bad guys are using to perpetuate bad actions. When it comes to AI-generated deepfakes impacting businesses' money or individuals' money, there's ARUP, a large British engineering firm, a global engineering firm, through AI-generated deepfakes, they had $25 million stolen. Someone on their finance team thought they were talking to the CEO and CFO, but instead they were talking to criminals through a video conference call, and they were AI-generated deepfake masks for the video, as well as a voice mask. And so they thought they were talking to the person they knew well. And the mannerisms, the tonal inflection, all of it was so well done that the finance team was tricked into sending off $25 million to a bad account. And that's not the only case of that happening. In my time, just in the last 6 months, for example, every time I've spoken to a bank, they've said, oh yeah, the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had 2 or 3 attempts or actual wire transfers stolen from our customers. When I've spoken with cybersecurity incident response firms, almost the identical thing. Yeah, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had 2 or 3 of our customers get compromised and they've had money stolen. And so it's a big problem. It's not just reputation, it's your pocketbook as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that, and like you alluded to, AI's been around for several years, but it took a lot of talent and skill to be able to manipulate in a malicious manner. Now it doesn't. It takes $1 and a minute, and you can take anybody's voice and have them say anything you want them to say. You can have them be on video. And while it's fun, things like face swap and whatnot that our children love and that we enjoy and have a good time with, there's opposition in all things, right? As much good and fun as it brings, there's an equal amount of devastation and destruction that it's bringing with us. And so our next topic is we're going into an election year and a big election process coming up. We saw with Zelensky what happened when the deepfake came out and said that he surrendered. Lives were literally lost. And at my time in the War College and working on different things, there's a lot that happens. Do you feel like this is an issue for the American people moving into the election?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that everyone needs to be concerned about. One of the more alarming things I've heard is not just that this is happening, and it does seem like, especially people who are online a lot, are aware of what's going on, but I think there is an extreme overconfidence, especially with our younger people, that they can detect what is AI and what is not. And we all have to remember this is the worst the technology is going to be. It's only going to get better from here. And it's already to the point where if you're looking at it on your phone, you're not paying super attention, you cannot distinguish it from a real video. And it's only going to get better and in the hands of individuals to make things that are extremely realistic, viewable, everyone can do it. So you have to think, now there are already nations who have tried to use AI-generated content, not just deepfake videos or voice, but also news articles and all kinds of other paraphernalia that look like real legitimate information, and have sent this into other nations to try to influence the election.
Can I iterate one thing that you talked about? There was actually a deepfake detection challenge where they took global experts from around the world. They had 2,000 of the world's greatest experts that specialize in deepfake detection, and this was a few years ago. For $1 million on the line, the top one only got 65%. If the global leading experts can't get it right and score a D, what in the world makes people think that we can? So your point is very valid, because literally every second the technology is improving and even the experts can't tell.
Yeah, and so that's why it needs to be a concern, and we have to come up with other ways to deal with this across the spectrum of ways to deal with it that aren't just, well, you, the individual end user, need to be the one that can detect this. And then the other thing is really hard to measure is if somebody does throw a video out there like of Zelensky or a robocall of President Biden's voice like happened in New Hampshire or like some of the things that happened in the Taiwanese election, it's hard to measure whether or not that had an effect. Mm-hmm. Did it have, will a video that's produced here and sent out in October or something have a chilling effect on people going to the polls? And as we know, there are some districts in this nation that if you affect that even to a small percentage, 1 or 2 percentage points, you could shift the whole election. And you better believe that people are looking at this. So should it be a concern? Absolutely, it should be a concern.
I mean, to point to kind of a contemporaneous example that's going on right now is India is having an election right now, and they have had a myriad of issues arise from deepfakes. They've had fake celebrity endorsements where campaigns will all of a sudden, there will be things floating around on social media of, these Bollywood celebrities endorsing a certain political party, and then they have to come out and say, no, I did not do that. They have had fake things, put out there of the prime minister or of the ruling party saying things that they didn't say. But interestingly enough, there's also been cases where a political candidate has altered a real video of themselves to look more like a deepfake. So then people online will say, oh no, that's not real, that's not a deepfake, because the video didn't reflect well on them. Mm-hmm. So going back to my point earlier of kind of just undermining that fundamental trust, I mean, you can reach a point where nobody knows what to believe. And to reiterate what Adam said, actually measuring the amount of movement that type of thing happens is very difficult, and it gets even more difficult the more complex and the more that happens at scale, right? I mean, measuring the effect of one altered video, very, very difficult. Measuring the effect of dozens going in both directions, mm-hmm. impossible.
Well, there's several instances I've heard about. I know there's proof that that Russia intervened in Turkey's elections and helped Erdogan get reelected. I heard of a story in Chicago in a primary between two members of the same party, which is the dominant party in Chicago, and there was a deepfake video that was released of one of the candidates the day before voting. And on exit polls, people were saying, yeah, I saw the video, and it definitely affected how I voted. But the margin of error for the people saying that, for the percentage that it might have changed the outcome of the election, it fell within the margin of error. But the person that was the subject of the deepfake video did lose by an extremely, extremely narrow margin. Now, nobody could say for sure if the outcome would have been different, but the general consensus is, without the scientific proof of it, is that it absolutely affected the person who would have won probably didn't as a result of that. And the challenge that we're looking at here, because I read that same study that you were talking about, Brandy, is that Intel, for example, is working on technology with this, and they've gotten so sophisticated that if you have a 4K video, their technology looks for microscopic changes in the pixel color on different parts of your face, which denotes blood flow through veins. And right now, AI can't duplicate that yet. But there's two big flaws with the technology. One, your skin tone has to be light enough that it can be light enough to be able to detect it, and two, you've got to have a high enough quality video. So the thing that's interesting is if you have both those things, Intel can get up into the 60-something% chance of detecting whether or not something's fake. But then in that same competition, which this was interesting, they had people see if they could try and beat the winners. And in most cases, what it took to beat the winner is you put a filter over the video that was static, but it made it look a little pixelated, and then all things were defeated by something that simple. And so it's pretty scary that the countermeasures for the good guys are so simple to deploy if you're a bad actor that it renders a lot of those technologies almost a moot point, I think.
And if I can add something to that, I mean, AI presents an entire novel set of problems that we have to deal with from a policy perspective. But what I'm actually more concerned about is how it's going to exacerbate existing problems. Right now, the confidence among the general public, and this is, true regardless of political party, the confidence surrounding election integrity is very, very, very low. And so if you add an element like this into an election, I mean, imagine that something like what you just brought up takes place the day before the presidential election. And there, in some of those swing states, you're within margin of error. Imagine the public, societal ramifications that that could have. I mean, it's a very daunting thing, and it's one of those things that, we may not think about it right up until it happens, but that could open a can of worms that I'm not sure we're ready to deal with as a society.
Yeah, once you squeeze the tube, you can't put the toothpaste back, can you? We were working with a political strategist, and he does stuff all over the world. He's one of the leading experts, and we were talking about AI and how you can manipulate stuff, and he said he loves doing it. Because we said, wouldn't you like to be able to fix this problem? And he said, no, because I play in dark magic. I manipulate things, I make people look bad, I make people sound bad. That's what I do, and until the government forces otherwise, I'm going to continue to do that. And I just think that that's kind of terrifying. So let's...
Another quick thing to say about that, and this is to anybody watching this who just thinks that this is just another flash in the pan, and this is, another moral hysteria, and this is like all the others that have come before it, and like, oh, things will settle down, and we'll figure this out, and people will stop freaking out about it. You've got to understand that this is different. And it's different for a number of reasons. One, because the technology is so powerful. This is one of those, shifts in technology that we really need to look at and understand, like the shift going to the internet, or others that have come before it. But this one's happening very, very gradually, and then all at once. It's happening very fast. The other thing is scale. And we as human beings are really bad at understanding scale, especially if it's exponential or it's just beyond our ability to comprehend. We can understand things at like the village size level, but anything larger than that, it's really difficult for us to wrap our heads around. We have to understand that these tools are in the hands of everyone. Everyone. And as exacerbated by COVID, so much of what we do in our lives, working otherwise, is online. It's an image on a screen. Those two things are coming together, or all of those factors are coming together to create a situation, and then you combine it with overconfidence and being able to detect the deception to create a perfect recipe where really bad things are happening and people don't even realize it. Manipulation is happening at scale and people don't even realize it. And I'm not as worried about the very politically engaged, if we're talking about the election specifically, I'm not as worried about the very politically engaged, because if they hear something that's like, oh, that doesn't sound like something they would say, there will be an ability there to maybe detect something. But for all of those who are a little more casually involved, they're going to have no idea. And they might just see, well, you add social media in this, and they might just see something coming across their TikTok. They watch a video for a couple of seconds. It changes their mind or influences or sways them. All of these things are combining to create this, what I consider a very, very big concern that I do not think we're prepared for. And it's not happening at a pace where we as humans culturally can come up with the tools we need to deal with it.
And if I could just add to that, I think it's an excellent point, and the use case that I would kind of point towards is social media. Social media really became ubiquitous probably 2011, 2012. And at the time, it was, oh, this is a great way to connect with people. This is a fantastic way to bring people together. We are just now starting to understand some of the societal implications of social media, which is far more straightforward to technology than this is, right? And so from a policy perspective, you really want to get out in front of these things, because just widespread adoption and scale will breed not only the problems that we're anticipating here, there is a whole set of problems that nobody has even thought of yet. We're talking about the known unknowns. There is a set of unknown unknowns that comes along with the adoption and democratization and scale of every new technology. That's another thing to consider that's a little spooky.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. So how should we be concerned about more than just the AIs and the deep fakes? Like, what else is there that we should be really concerned about in this process?
I've got a point to make about that I think is really interesting. And for the record, I'm a political moderate, and so I voted for people on both sides. But before I mention this one case, but I remember while President Donald Trump was in office, and he was talking about rolling out vaccines for the country with COVID. And he was explaining that he wanted to send them to New York, but the New York governor had a problem with it or something like that. And I remember watching the news conference on one station, and they explained the whole thing. Oh, I want to send to New York, but we've got to wait for the New York governor because he's saying he doesn't want to let it in. But then another news station, one that typically leans against his political party, they had maliciously edited the real media and cut out the parts where he's saying he wanted to send it to New York and made it sound like he was holding it hostage for political reasons. And it was a blatant misuse of public trust. Absolutely blatant. And the crazy thing is that for all the work that people are putting into trying to detect deep fakes, there is real media that gets manipulated to change the story that a deep fake engine will say, well, it's real. Because it was real media. It was real media. Someone just cut out the things that they found inconvenient. And so how do you detect those as well? I think it's a big problem.
It's a huge problem, and even with us, I mean, this is kind of where we spend our time. When you're talking to the average person, and especially my parents, even me, I watched September 11th happen. I was deployed overseas. I watched the plane hit the tower. I saw it collapse. I knew at that moment that was real. But then fast forward to last year when it looked like a bomb at the Pentagon, everything went down and was affected by it. So for our parents and our grandparents, you can't believe anything you hear, see, or read anymore. And instead of trying to prove things false, we're trying to prove them with truth.
You know, just to kind of expand it out for a moment, because obviously, you know, political issues, national security issues, they're going to garner a lot of attention. But, you know, university, I work with a lot of young people. Another issue I don't think maybe we talk about as much is we've seen the effects that social media has had on the psyche of young people. AI augmentation could really ramp that up to another level in terms of if you're I've got 2 daughters. If you're a teenage girl looking at social media and you're looking at a bunch of now AI, not only is it the supermodels that are getting all their photos photoshopped, right? It's all these social media influencers have automatically AI enhanced images of themselves, AI enhanced images of their life, of their lifestyle. I mean, what about the psychological effect of that? What about the psychological effect of not knowing if you're interacting with somebody online who is real or if you're talking to a bot? I mean, we are getting to that point. So, I mean, obviously there are these use cases which have massive geopolitical ramifications, but I also don't want to downplay the significance of these individual cases that could happen to young people, old people, that could just even cause emotional damage, because at scale, we've seen what social media has done.
Yeah, and actually the suicide rate has gone up in youth 71% since 2010. This is a big issue, and if you haven't heard of sextortion, write that one down and talk to your kids about it. Do a deep dive, because it's taking over in a big way, and it's sort of the same thing. So how is this affecting businesses? Just what's, I guess, the biggest threat right now that you guys see?
Yeah, so we've extrapolated into these areas that are very concerning, are big. A lot of them are a little more future focused. So we can talk about what's happening today, right now. At my company, we see attacks. We have enough customers now that we see basically any attack that's happening in the world, we'll see a version of it. And to go back to what I said before, many of the same attacks are still happening, and a lot of the threat actors are not using AI because they don't need to. They're still so effective at just doing the attacks they're doing today, they don't need to. But the ones that are incorporating AI into their attacks are becoming even more effective. And we're seeing, slight variation on classic attacks. Like, for example, there is, I mentioned it earlier, business email compromise, which used to be, I send you an email, I make it look like it's coming from the CEO, it might be spoofed, I may have taken over his account. You're the controller, you're in finance, you receive this email from the CEO, he's out of town, the bad guys know that because your CEO is posting it all over social media. They send it to you and say, hey, I need you to transfer $50,000 here, can you do it right now, I gotta close a deal, whatever it is, right? And then they get bilked out of tens of thousands, hundreds, millions of dollars, right? Well, you add deep fakes into that, and that's what was referred to earlier. You can now have a Zoom call with the CEO telling you to transfer that money. These things are happening right now. They're happening today. Or I can just do a phishing email, and I make the phishing email look totally realistic with perfect grammar because I can use the AI tool I pay $20 a month for, and I'm someone who doesn't even speak English, and now I have something that looks perfect for that company, and it just took my percentage of success rate on my phishing from 2% to 20%. And that means millions and millions, if not billions of dollars. So, and this kind of thing is happening now. It's slow, but it's starting to creep in because now all these groups that are doing these kinds of attacks are looking for these types of advantages. So there are the unknown unknowns do scare me, but right now it's the known attacks that are being just supercharged a little bit with AI, and it's only going to get worse, and it's only going to happen more, and companies are not quite ready for it.
Well, and Brandon, I want to ask you about this, but even there's apps that people can use in real time where they're having a conversation with you that is changing your entire face. So the dating scams, people are losing money left and right because they think they're talking to, you know, a Caucasian male when it's somebody in Nigeria who can put on the filter and have a real conversation and have it alter their voice.
So I'll let you in on a little secret. A lot of people think that like phishing and social engineering, that was all a novel thing when the internet came out. In reality, the majority of phishing tactics, campaigns, some of these social engineering campaigns had existed for centuries beforehand. You know, a very common phishing technique that everyone's familiar with is the Nigerian prince, right? Where, oh, I'm a Nigerian prince, I need you to wire me $300 so I can get my fortune from my corrupt uncle. That's been happening since the 1800s. It was just conducted via mail, right? So oftentimes, you know, to reiterate something that Adam said, you're not necessarily going to see something that is completely net new. You're going to see an old tactic that is now being performed through a new medium or enhanced, given an extra layer of legitimacy. So I mean, romance scams, you know, there's an entire show about catfishing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't watch it for the record, but I mean,
it's okay. It's a safe space.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's been around for a decade at least. And now imagine that with that added layer of, oh, I'm actually talking to somebody who looks real, who looks like this person that they're describing. I mean, once again, not a very, you know, correct way to put it, but same stuff, different day.
Right.
Just new technology, new medium, new added layer of legitimacy that could increase the hit rate.
And I know we're getting you know, I want to make sure that this is meaningful for the audience. So I think what we need to discuss is how can companies combat this now? Companies, and I think it's okay to put in families too, because those are our, you know, that's our greatest resource right there. So what can we do currently with what's going on?
I'm really glad you just said families because some recent reporting has come out, some of the leaks from a contracting company that works for intelligence agencies in China showed that when they attack companies, they don't just attack the company, they attack individuals in the people's lives who work at that company, including children, trying to get them to open phishing emails so then they could collect intelligence and then attack the executive or just the manager, whoever works at that company. So families are involved, not just in the scams, you know, Nigerian prince or whatever, catfishing scams, but also in nation states attacking businesses. Families are involved now. So these techniques are really important. Something that can be done today that is simple to think about, it might be a little complex in the instituting of it in your organization, is to really think through the way you do sensitive things at your company. And by sensitive, I mean like transferring money, handling the W-2s of the company, anything that's really sensitive where you're dealing with information or money that you want to make sure you do only in one way, the right way every time, so the money doesn't go out to the criminals. Well, you need to think through that, think of all the ways that someone could attack it, but then just come up with simple ways to fight that. One of those things could be using a code word or some sort of safe code that you have previously set up so that even if there's a Zoom call with someone that looks exactly like your CEO telling you to transfer $1 million, you just ask them for that passcode and they're not going to be able to give it to you unless they've already breached your company. If that's happened, you have a whole other set of problems. So coming up with that, but that even works with your family. I've set it up with mine so that if someone tried to manipulate my children, my wife, with a voice that sounded like mine on the phone, they know to ask for that word, to say, this is a weird request, tell me the word.
Yeah.
And if they can't say it, then, but that's just one example. There are many procedures like this you can set up to help make your company or your family resistant to these kinds of scams.
And something important about passcodes, especially for families, you need to understand that your phone is always listening, even if you're not on a phone call. And if somebody's already compromised one of your children's phones or your phone, they can listen in on family conversations. So when you set that passcode, you need to take extra precautions, like everybody leave your phone inside. We're going to go to the backyard where there's no electronic devices, and we're going to decide on our password, and don't ever share the password through email or voice calls or text, ever, because once you do, we can't use that password anymore. We've got to go pick a different one.
I just think it's so interesting that we're going old school, you know, password. What's a safe word?
Smoke signals.
To fight this, right? Brandon, thoughts? What can companies do right now, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think just adding layers of redundancy is a huge thing. I mean, and the more sensitive something is, the more, you know, layers you want there to be in order to have to defeat it. It just increases the difficulty of something actually happening, of somebody actually, you know, successfully exfiltrating information or exfiltrating money. I mean, the thing I always refer to is, like, on a nuclear submarine, I'm so glad that it's not just the captain being able to turn a key and go, right? I mean, they have to have the codes from the president. There has to be multiple people who sign off on it, right, on a launch. Similar to that, you know, as he said, code words, maybe saying, hey, I can't just authorize this through one person. I need multiple layers through multiple mediums of communication. Now, does that make it impossible to do something, to successfully, you know, get scammed? No, but it makes it so that your threat actor has to be much more sophisticated, much more persistent, and they're going to have to evade detection for a much longer time.
So is there currently technology out there that is working as we're moving forward with this to something that companies could put into place?
Just a real quick thought on that. You're not going to have one technology that's going to be a panacea that's going to solve all of these problems. It's going to be defense in depth. It's going to be a kaleidoscope. It's going to be a collection of layers of defense or security that you put in place to help with this. One of those technologies may be something that, you know, can help you detect AI and things like that. But you've got to have a set of those, and then not only that, you also have to have the right procedures in place with the right people in place. So if you have all of those things, it's going to make you highly resistant, not proof, you know, not foolproof, but highly resistant to these kinds of attacks. So I'm hesitant when people say, you know, what's the technology that's going to, we're not going to technology alone our way out of this, but the technology has to be part of the solution because we're dealing with a technological problem. So you want to make sure that the humans are in the mix and multiple different types of defenses are set up.
So completely agree with that. A lot of the conversation right now that I've seen is centered around detection, which I think detection is always going to be an important thing. We talked about the Intel thing. There's some other things out there. I'll speak from my experience as a professor. Even with text-based AI models, so ChatGPT, detecting essays, papers, write-ups that were written by ChatGPT is, if you're a college student, you're listening to this, you didn't hear this from me, it's really hard.
Write it like a dumb high school student in that voice.
I mean, write it at a B+ level high school student.
Right, and I mean, the few times I've actually caught students doing it, I was like, this is way better than everything you've turned in so far this semester. This is weird. But the issue with detection is that it's probabilistic in nature, right? So this is one issue. You're not going to get an AI detection software that says 100% this is AI. Mm-hmm. It will say this is likely AI, this is somewhat likely AI, this is unlikely AI. Well, what do you do with that? You know, if you're 80% sure that a student cheated on a paper, how do you confront a student about that? It's really difficult. And the other problem is you end up in this kind of arms race where it's like, okay, well, the generative AI gets better, and the detection AI is not used to this new quality of generative content. Then the detection AI catches up, and then this gets better, and it just kind of continues going forward. So detection, an important component, but we should not become over-reliant on detection for that reason. Now, an additional layer that can be added is kind of cryptologic authentication, right? Some kind of a digital stamp on authorized content that, you know, is cryptologically secure and can be tied back to the origin of that content. Now, once again, really, really useful, and I think that could proved to be a huge, huge tool in terms of saying, okay, we actually know that this came from Adam.
Yeah, we can't
right?
prove what's fake, but we can 100% prove what's real.
Right. But to add another thing to that, if Adam is really loose on his personal cybersecurity and he's not guarding the back end of that tool well, if somebody can get access to his personal computer or his company's network, then all of a sudden they have access to sign off on that content.
Right.
So it really is a multifaceted thing.
Yeah.
I think the only point that I'd add to that, and I know both these gentlemen would agree to it because I agree with everything you guys have said, is that no one solution, no collection of solutions can guarantee that you will absolutely not be compromised. It's not possible anymore. If you have a persistent and well-funded enough threat actor, they can breach governments. And so what can you do as a private business? The best you could aim for is to have enough deterrence in place, enough layers of security and qualified people and processes to make you a hard target. And for the most part, a lot of these threat actors, most of them typically are looking for low-hanging fruit, and if you're too difficult, they'll move on and go to someone else. If you're a government or a highly prized target, well, I'm sorry.
Wow.
I also want to address that we're talking about, and sometimes this can be referred to as ruthless optimism, where we're depending on the end users to solve the problem. There are companies right now worth trillions, millions, billions of dollars that are making money off this, and we are not holding them accountable for letting threat actors and others use this technology. We already made this mistake with social media companies, and we still have not held them accountable. We've already made this a mistake by not having a federal privacy law in the United States to protect consumers. And this is all done, for the sake of technology and progress. We cannot make the same mistake with AI. And yes, I know there's the argument that other countries won't have these same strictures. Well, that's fine. But we have the biggest companies and the best ones in the United States right now. They are within our regulatory reach. We have to get them to not be able to externalize the cost that they're causing the world by just pushing this technology out there. There's got to be policy, regulatory enforcement to make them help solve this problem. We all want the technology, but we got to be worthy of it. We got to do it in a way that helps us. We didn't do it with social media. We still got to solve that problem. We can't make the same mistake.
It's
and they need to be held accountable.
This obviously gets us all excited, right?
Yeah.
It is the wild, wild west. There's no regulation currently, and this is what you're saying. We have to do this. It's the only thing that we really can do right now.
Well, and just to add to that, I mean, it's completely unrealistic to put it on the end user either. I mean, think about the amount of content all of us consume in a day. I mean, if you spend an hour on TikTok or Instagram Reels, how many videos have you consumed? Probably hundreds. If 20% of those are political videos, is it reasonable to expect that, hey, this person is going to spend an hour on social media, they've consumed 20 to 30, potentially politically tangential videos, that person should go and verify themselves that every single one of those videos is real?
Won't happen.
I mean, it's just completely unrealistic expectation. I mean, who's doing that?
Nobody that I know of. So I would like to, I'd like to end maybe with your final thought. What is your overall feeling of, it kind of feels hopeless, right? You sit here and listen to this and you go, that sucks. What are we gonna do? What is your message that you think people really need to take away from the dangers of AI, deepfake, manipulated media? What do you want them to know, and what do you think you can do to help?
It's a really good question. And I think we have a lot of the tools in place to slow this down, or to at least put it in a way where we can deal with it, and then as it progresses, just work to deal with it. But the first thing we have to do is admit that it's a problem. And I do not feel like we as a society are admitting that this is a problem. And we also like to conflate things. People talk a lot about AGI and, like Skynet taking over and killing all the humans, which is not a completely unrealistic problem, but it's a different problem than what we're talking about. And I do think we should have the AI Council and talk about safety in that way, but we need to talk about safety in this way. So I do think people should take the action today to figure out what are the policies, procedures, tactics you can put in place today that make your business and your family more safe. We should have good, open conversations with each other about how to understand what's true and what is the information we're going to depend on, and what does our social media intake look like in your life to really understand how that affects you. I think we should be talking about this in colleges, in high schools, in our families, in businesses, all of those areas we can do that. We should be doing that today, but then we should also look at the regulatory policy solutions that we can do. And as collectively as a society, we need to get together and push for that, demand it, and not just let this fall by the wayside like we have with other technology issues. We need to engage in that way. But I'm optimistic. I think we can do it. We've just got to turn that corner and hold people accountable and take the steps we need to in our own lives.
So if the White House or the president was watching right now and you had a direct conversation, what would you tell them about this?
The same thing I would tell them about privacy, about social media, technology companies. They need to be held accountable. We have to change the paradigm. We can't just say, oh, it's Section 230, we can't touch it. We've got to change this. And it's unfortunately not just up to the president, it's up to Congress,
right,
who is having a difficult time getting anything done. But we've got to get this done. We have to do this in a way that helps protect citizens. And unfortunately, there's a lot of lobbying money in there. And the only thing that's going to overcome that is when the voice of the citizens is so loud and so united, at least in the idea of getting something done, that it overcomes all of that money that's in technology. And those who are elected know they're not going to get elected again unless they fix this, unless they address it. And we're not going to, the other thing, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We're not going to get it right the first time. But a step in the right direction is great, and then we can build on that, we can build on that.
Right.
So I think cautious optimism is the right attitude to take, right? You don't want to be, I'm always hesitant to come off as a Luddite and saying, hey, we need to smash all the computers and go back to, living in log cabins. I mean, it sounds kind of nice, though, sometimes.
At least for the weekend, right?
Yeah. But the one thing I will say in terms of, kind of on an optimistic note, the technology is new. Human beings are not, right? I think that the issue with technology is that it brings out or exacerbates a lot of issues underlying the human condition and human society. Now, the thing that's nice about that is we may not know what's coming next for AI, but we can learn from those patterns that we've observed as humans, right? And I think you can do that on an individual level. I think you can do that on a societal level. So if we reflect on some of the big kind of technological shocks that our society has endured over the last 20, 30 years, the internet, social media, mobile devices, well, we can reflect on, hey, what did we do well? What did we not do well, right? With the rollout of social media, I mean, we're talking about that right now. We missed the bus on a bunch of things. Well, how can we learn from that? As a family, did I let my teenage son have completely unlimited internet access in the age of Live Leak and all this horrible stuff? Well, maybe we should learn from that. Similarly, as a society, hey, did we miss the bus on regulating some of these things? Did we miss, really trying to understand some of the implications of this as it was developing instead of trying to go in and fix all these problems post facto? So I think really, hey, let's analyze our performance, both individually as a family and as a society, on some of these big waves of technologies that have come out. And let's try to apply those lessons to AI the best that we can, instead of just kind of sitting here trembling over this unknown which is coming, which is daunting. But there are things that we can do now.
I think the biggest thought that I have about it is that the days of apathy and being reactive are gone, right? If you let that happen, you're going to be acted upon, end of story. So it's time to be proactive. It's time to become knowledgeable. It's time to look into things yourself. And at whatever level that you're at, whether you are a parent in a family or a leader in a business or a leader in politics, you can't just ignore it. You have to engage. You have to. Otherwise, you're not going to like how it acts upon you. End of story.
Yeah, I agree with that. Any final thoughts? Did you guys get to say what you wanted to say?
I think so, but thank you for putting this together, because I think these types of environments are super important just to kind of spread out the awareness of what's going on and hopefully help us get in front of this wave. So thank you.
Right.
Yeah, and the promise of this technology is amazing. It's used in a lot of incredible ways that are going to benefit society and make us much more productive and really going to improve lives, save lives. It's going to be amazing. But we've
Yeah,
got
there's
to be
been medical breakthroughs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about the vaccines and other things that can be created by this, but we've got to be worthy of the gift.
Absolutely.
And that means we have to look at the shadow side of it. We have to admit that it's there, and then we have to take measures to make it better and not abdicate that responsibility.
Yeah, I think some really good points today. We can't live in fear and too worried about it. We can't freeze in fear. We need to just move forward in faith, but in doing so, learn about the technology, put in the safeguards. I mean, lock it up as tight as you can. Don't be an easy target. Talk to your children, talk to your coworkers, come up with not safe words, but code words, safe words, I guess, right? If that's what you're protecting. And we want to thank you guys for coming today and learning about the dangers of AI, deepfake, and manipulated media. And we wish you all the best in your endeavors with your businesses. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to ask. I know Adam has to go catch a flight, but if anyone here, you guys showed up, and if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free. Yes, please. What's your name?
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Do we have faith in our elected officials and processes that can barely tackle problems of social media to effectively address this? Or do you?
Ooh, loaded question. Here's the thing.
No.
Yeah, here's the thing. Elected officials tend to respond to societal pressure, right? So I think, whether or not you have faith in elected officials, I mean, I would say that if you were to poll the general population, it's probably pretty low. However, elected officials like to keep their power. So can we, create a big enough societal swell or pressure to influence that? I absolutely think so. But that's where it starts, right? You can't expect them to start anything on their own that's going to be productive. It has to start with the people pressuring them to do so.
I think one of the problems in the past has been that there weren't good answers. In other words, the people who were in power or working for them didn't know enough about technology, understand the issues well enough, and it was difficult. It was very uneven. I think that problem is not the same anymore. There are a lot of really, really smart technologists, people know what they're doing, who are working for various senators, congressmen, other think tanks who know about this issue. We have a lot of really good ideas to solve these problems. And the issue is actually getting them done, which I think goes to making sure that the right kind of incentives are provided so that we can get the solutions. A proof that things can get done and it can get done rapidly is the ban on TikTok. Now, whether you want to talk about if that was the right thing to do or the right way to do it, the fact that it got passed shows that that can happen. We just need the right incentives set up to pass things that are going to be more effectual over time.
And when you talk about regulation, I mean, early on in the conversation, we worked with a political strategist, one of the top in the world. He consults on multiple continents. And he said that he liked manipulating things, that he did it for his benefit. We said, well, is it more beneficial to manipulate or to have truth about your candidates? He said, I think it's more beneficial to manipulate. The only way that we'll change things is if the governments require us to change things and authenticate our content so that we know where the video came from or where the audio came from, that it's authenticated through the government or the candidate or strategist so that we can follow it back. So at the end of the day, I think it still comes back down to regulation. We can't let people run wild. We saw this with Taylor Swift, where her pictures, millions and millions of views. We've seen this with lots of celebrities who are saying, I never said that, I never did this, but it's too late because nobody's tracking who did it, where it came from, how we can find it. So I believe moving forward that you're going to live in a world where you have to authenticate everything you do for reputation management, for insurance, for truth, trust, and transparency so people can see who put out the content, when did they put it out, where did they put it out, and how do we validate it? That's what I'm working on.
It's a good question.
Yeah, anyone else have a question? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. Yeah.